Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This is episode number 211 of the show, and man, it's been quite a journey to get here. This week I have 5 new reviews for you folks at home, and that it's going to include Viridian Gate Online, Darkling Siege, book number 7 in the Viridian Gate Online series, Mind's Journey, The King's Quest, from me, and also we're going to have 3 reviews from our contributor, Ian Mitchell, including his review of Alumni, Artorian's Archives, book number 2, Dungeons of Strata, Deepest Dungeon number 1, and Press Start, System Discovered, book number 1. So we have 5 reviews in total. But before we go into any of those reviews, we're going to give you a little bit of LitRPG news. I only got a couple of stories this week in LitRPG news. One is a sighting in the wild of actual print LitRPG books. Austin Patton contributed a photo to several LitRPG groups and it's been shared around a bunch of times, so you've probably already seen it. But he found an end cap at Barnes & Noble's in Las Vegas for LitRPG books. There's a whole picture here, if you can see it in the video version of the podcast. But it has a bunch of well-known LitRPG titles. Some are amazing. Others I'm like, that's a curious choice, but still, they're all LitRPG, and they're all here being shown in an actual physical bookstore. So I think that's always exciting to see our actual physical books in a store somewhere. So that's cool. In other LitRPG news, we have a sad farewell to Lavelle Jackson. He didn't know anything. He's just decided to stop doing reviews. Sorry. He's the host of the LitRPG Reroll, which is just his weekly show where he does a video of a review of an audiobook or an ebook he's listening to for LitRPG. And he's decided to stop posting there and to stop doing reviews of LitRPG novels and audiobooks. And according to his post on Facebook and for his group, this is his word for word exact reasoning. He says, however, since I'm an author now, I've been surveying the community to see if I need to stop referring to reviewing. I certainly don't want to alienate anyone. That is the last thing I want to do. The feedback has been about 60% yes, 40% no, as far as whether I should continue. And based upon that reasoning, he's decided to not review because he's become a LitRPG author and he has several books out at this point, 2 series, which we've actually read and reviewed on the show before. And I can absolutely respect that particular viewpoint. He's noted there's been some criticism of being an author and a well-known LitRPG reviewer, and he's just made the decision. So I definitely appreciate all the time he's spent reviewing. It's always been helpful to other people to get views out there and to kind of talk about this genre that we all love and know, but to get into the eyes and views of the people. So it's always been nice. So we'll definitely miss someone contributing to that particular perspective. So thanks, Lavelle, for reviewing, and we hope your author writing goes well. Okay, on to Out Now. This is where we just list all the stuff that's come out now. We haven't had a chance to review this week. That includes Guard Web of Novels Empire, which is the first book in that series. They recently added a second book onto a pre-order list. But first book out now for you to enjoy or not. I haven't read it, so don't know. Also out, Dungeon Crafting book number 3 by Jonathan Brooks, The Crafter's Dilemma. I've enjoyed that series. I read book 1. Haven't or to cut up in book 2 or 3, but it's done amazingly well. So it's definitely probably a good series to check it out. Also out now is Endless Fantasy Online: The Elk Kingdom, the second book in that particular series, and Ultima: A LitRPG Journey, Legends Online, book number 4. So all stuff that has come out now as an ebook for this week. In new LitRPG audiobooks is going to be Ethria. I'm probably saying that wrong. The Pioneer by A.R. Holloway, read by Christian J. Gillard. Also out is Hero Time, a LitRPG novel, Metagamers Chronicles, book number 3. Kind of a nice, I've only read the ebook. I haven't listened to the audiobook, but the ebook was always entertaining because this is a transported to your tabletop game. So it's a little different, has a little different of a metagame story than trapped in a VR game story or transferred to magical fantasy world, and some interesting inside gamer jokes. And if you've ever done tabletop RPGing, you're probably going to like that. Also out now, though, is Galaxec, a sci-fi RPG, Skeleton in Space, book number 2. And the name Skeleton in Space kind of describes it quite well. It's actually a very entertaining story. Very good if you like crafting magical discovery kind of stuff. Written by Andres Lewis. He's told me how to say his name. I've met him before. But it's out as an audiobook for you guys to enjoy. Produced by Mountain Press. Okay, on to upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off a bunch of stuff that's coming out in the near future, so you can plan your reading schedule or your publication schedule for an author. It's also useful for both things. February 1st, it'll be Thousand Tales Side Quest by Chris Nee. On February the 3rd, the amazing, Elemental Dungeon, book number 2. Haven't read it. I'm going to assume it's good because I like book number 1, called Infernal Bones. February the 3rd is going to also be Underworld Proving Grounds by Apollos Thorne. Now, I know that one's going to be amazing just because I've loved every single one of the Underworld books. So this one is probably no doubt going to be equally as entertaining. So definitely go pick that up. Go pre-order it. You do yourself a favor. February the 4th will be Battlemaster, the Blood Crown, book number 1. February the 4th will also be the Last Time Loop, book number 2. Volume 2. February the 4th, it'll be a new series from Carrie Summer called Tales of the North Blood. February the 6th, the 3rd book in the Bad Guy series by Eric Ugland. February the 7th, the 4th book in the Transformation series. February the 10th, An Equation with One Unknown, written by Vasily Mahenko, set in the Barleone universe. On February the 12th, this is new to the list, the 2nd book in the Web of Worlds series called Mage. So there you go. Book number 1 is out now. Book 2 is scheduled for February the 12th release. On February the 13th, the World of Karak, book number 2. On February the 14th, it'll be the 2nd book in the World of Change series, also written by Vasily Mahenko, called Pearl of the South. On February the 14th, the sequel to Shade's first rule will be out, called The Second Betrayal. February the 18th, the 3rd book in the Skyrealms Online series called Axe Storm. On February 29th, Seeds of Chaos, book number 4. February 29th as well to be Glory of Formations Empires, book number 3. March the 3rd, 2020, a new series from J.D. Astra called Neon Dark. March the 9th, it'll be The Incarnator, Pardic Stellar, book number 1. That's a translated work from Magic Dome Books. March the 10th, it'll be Viridian Online Insurrection, The Alchemic Webinar, book number 3. March the 20th, the 3rd book in the Underdog series. March the 30th, the 5th book in the Hero Online series. April the 1st, it'll be Sentence to Troll, book number 3. So nice, jokey kind of really state. April the 2nd, it'll be the Good Guy series, book number 8. April the 15th, Dragonheart Sea of Sorrow. So the 5th book in that series. On May the 1st, it'll be War Singer, a Little Bit Dragon Rider adventure. So it's the 4th book in their Chemi Online Chronicle series. So there we go, everything all the way up to May. There are a couple other pre-orders later than that, just they're too far out for me to list everything. So there we go. On to the new releases and reviews. Okay, up first this week is going to be Viridian Gate Online Darkling Siege, the Viridian Gate Archives, book number 7, written by J.A. Hunter. It is 424 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. Not even gods are safe from the power of the fabled Doomforge weapon. Grimjack didn't set out to be the leader of Elgar's united armies, but with the dungeons falling one by one and hordes of Rothgar pouring into the material plane, it's up to him to save both the citizens and the travelers from digital destruction. His doomsday weapon will take him straight into the heart of Morsheim, but once there, even the combined might of the Empire and Crimson Alliance might not be enough. He'll have to uncover secrets buried for millennia just to get within striking distance of a death god gone mad, and the choices he'll make will change him and the world forever. So there you go, nice description. Without spoiling any of the plot line here, this is such a great story, I gotta say. James A. Hunter has always been a really good writer. I've never not liked anything he's written. But there are some scenes in this story that are going to make you tear up if you have a heart. There's humor, there's action, adventure, plot twist, and more action. But I think the thing that kind of strikes me in this particular story is that there are a couple of things where it's like, oh, it's the end of this. It's kind of at the end of the series. And the author is definitely tugging at your heartstrings in several respects, whether it's going to be tragedy or just like kind of wonderful scenes. Again, I'm not going to spoil them. But that's definitely something, a refrain you see through other reviews as well, where they're like, this made me cry, or this made me tear up, or whatever, or just had wonderful, humorous moments here. And that's just, something that's kind of set it above other. Everything in the series has been good, but this one definitely kind of kicked it up. I think part of that is just because everything's wrapping up, and so you spent 7 books with these characters, and so you've invested such a way those. So you're invested in what happens, whether it's good or bad, happy, sad, whatever the case is. I personally thought this was going to be the last book in the series. I recall the author saying something about it in the last book of the series at some time in the past. I guess I'm mistaken. But it feels like it's the second to last book almost. Like a lot of the series plot lines are being have been tied up. And it kind of sets up the series for this big kind of finish. There's a little bit of a forced ending. I'm not going to spoil what that is, but it also makes for a really great hook. In what's likely to be the last book in the main Viridian inline series. In addition to all that stuff, of course, there's just like well-written action adventure. A number of, again, touching moments for me just pushed it over from good to great. So for me, VGO book number 7 gets a score of 8 out of 10. So that's it for me. So Viridian Online, Darkling Siege, the Viridian Gate Archives book number 7 with the score of 8 out of 10. I thought it was great. Okay, next up is Mind's Journey, the King's Quest, written by William H. Dwayne. It is 457 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. What is an amnesiac to do? In a world of monsters, a stranger with a lost, forgotten past seeks the great wish-granting king for answers. But is it worth the cost? Finding himself in a world he doesn't understand, with a voice in his head and a strange being guiding him, he travels to the city of Astra, where the great king dwells. And the answers might be found. And with the friends he makes along the way, the stranger faces new challenge, and the world faces each new challenge the world throws at him in his journey of action and adventure. With no memories to guide him, all he can do is chase this single desire. Who am I? That is the question that burns inside of him. In Astra, the greatest challenge awaits him. To gain what he seeks, he must pay through violence. Only the death of a monster can give him what he desires, the answers he seeks. But can he stand up to the dangers of this unknown world, or will he crumble beneath the toils of monsters slaying and his own growing fear? Every wish comes with a price. So there you go. That is a basic description. I think it's that. Well, you know that. The beginning of the story is frankly tedious. It is. It's probably the hardest part of this novel to get through. And there's one big reason for that. The author does a really good job of like describing the logical consequences of not having your memory, which is the setup for this story. The setup is essentially the main character is transported either to a magical fantasy world with RPG mechanics, or he's trapped in a VR game of some sort, or some kind of game, right? It's never really clear in the story. But just whatever the when he gets there, he arrives without his memory. So, and that's not an uncommon kind of premise at all. However, with this one, the author kind of takes it to a next level, and that the main character does not understand. He can understand what people are saying, but he, for some reason, doesn't have a past to draw from. He doesn't have a grasp of social consequences, how to talk to people. He has no confidence in himself because he lacks any kind of memory to draw upon for social situations or for how to do things or fight or talk, apparently. He still knows how to talk, though. But it's like I said, I appreciate that it's kind of a very, again, logical progression of what it would mean to actually be without a memory or a past in an RPG world, or anywhere. But for me, that logical consequence, or that logical description of scenario kind of was overly logical because it wasn't fun anymore. For like the first 20% of the story, essentially the main character is just a bunch of confusion. He has a ton of awkward self-doubt. He makes observations about the game stuff he sees, but he doesn't understand it. And so it becomes something that's just like, oh, by the way, this thing pops up and I see this or I hear this voice. And that's not, and the RPG stuff in that respect is not, it's almost an afterthought for the story sometimes. Instead, the focus is again on the amnesic stuff and his quest to get granted a magical wish to restore his memory. But again, that first section of the story is just a bunch of bad conversations with a weak character that I did not like. He's weak and he's wimpy. And again, I understand it's part of the character arc for the main character. He doesn't really overcome that by the end of the story, but there is some improvement in that respect. But again, that first just like chunk of story was just so hard because I didn't like the main character. I thought he was just not somebody I wanted to root for. And if I wasn't doing this for a review, I probably would have stopped after like the first 10-15% of the novel and just put it down and never come back. But because I try to be thorough, I continued and read the rest of the story. And to some degree, things do improve in that respect, but it takes a really long time. The story itself doesn't really become interesting or pick up until after almost 40%, 50% of the story. It takes almost about halfway through the story. And the main character just continues that entire time. He does collect a few allies. There's a little bit of world building there. But your first like real bit of action doesn't really start until like that 40% mark. But even in that case, the main character is still very wimpy. And in most of the story up until like the last like 20%, he doesn't really come across as a proactive character. He's not really solving his own problems. Other people are saving him. Other people are whisking him away from danger or near death. And that to me was just never satisfying as far as story go. After that 50% mark, the story picks up on the action side quite a bit. But because of how the story unfolds, the main character should not survive that last half of the story. You definitely shouldn't survive that last like big action scene because he's not very high level and he's not powerful and he's never picked up a weapon. But he's just barely kind of practiced it. Somehow he makes it through this huge, massive, actiony, long, sustained battle almost unscathed to a degree. So it really wasn't a very satisfying ending because it didn't feel like he deserved to survive. And he really shouldn't have based upon the other things that happened in the novel. But still, I understand that is the progression point. On the game mechanics side, things are getting very light, oddly so. The main character hears a voice notifications. He sees stats and level increases. So this is technically RPG. However, it feels like he's the only one that sees those things. It's hinted at that there are other players, but regular people see these people as just people with strange powers. So there's no really big emphasis on the game stuff or any kind of gamer mentality. There are also like several mistakes in the story, like the main character gaining level 2 twice in the novel. The game stuff does exist in the story, but it feels almost incidental. And in the actual fights, those stat increases, especially the stat increase, because they're not the traditional necessarily strength, dexterity stuff. There's a bunch of other like stats like cleanliness and stuff. They feel like they don't really have an impact in the actual fights. Just that there are powers that the characters have, like, and this kind of bugged me in the fact that there were just powers that were just shown suddenly that the main character has or the side characters have that were not set up or shown before, and that always just kind of bothers me. So there are no like stat pages with characteristics or particular powers. Just the main character sometimes sees notifications with stat increases, or he gains enough experience points for a level, whatever the case is. But again, it's super light. Overall, story isn't bad, just didn't work for me. The beginning part is probably the part that turned me off the most, and I find it the hardest to get through. And again, I would have put this book down if I wasn't reviewing for the show. It just didn't get interesting at all until like more than halfway through the show, and that's too long for me to kind of continue through a story without like being engaged. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's going to be again Mind's Journey: The King's Quest with a score of 6 out of 10. And next up is going to be Ian's Picks of the Week. this is a segment of the show, Ryan Mitchell, a longtime LitRPG community member, somebody who's read and reviewed almost as much as me, has been kindly contributed his reviews of the stuff he's read, and so we have 3 nice reviews from him this week to add to the show, and we're going to begin with Alumni, Artorian's Archives book number 2, written by Dennis Vanderkerken and Dakota Kraut. So there we go. Ian's review of this one is real. Somebody says, I love watching the old guys stomping around. He says, the beginning part with the Artorian Ember and the trees is pretty interesting and nice pacing. Overall, the book doesn't feel completely put together. The seams are visible. I definitely enjoyed watching him stomping around his old school grounds. I had fun with the book. It ends somewhat mid-action. Great characters and the system. It left me hanging. But still, he gave it a score of 7.6 out of 10. So there are a bunch of qualifiers for the story. And that's pretty okay. I so enjoyed it. But for me, I remember reading book number 1. And while I enjoyed it, it didn't really feel it didn't feel as LitRPG as like the main Divine Transit, which is the story set in the same universe. And there were several reasons which I wanted to review the podcast when I mentioned for that review. But I enjoyed this still. So if you're going to check it out, if you'd like something with more cultivation aspects in the story, in addition to good action adventure, good storytelling, but not as heavy on the RPG side of things, more cultivation. But still, I gives it a 7.6 out of 10. Okay. He also gave us a review for Dungeons of Strata. And he actually gave it a much better review score of 8.8 out of 10, which is really good for him. He says, Descent into the Pit. By the time I hit the 30% mark, I was definitely feeling a Dark Souls vibe. Just a few hints at game elements and atmosphere. Nice. Martin's played his day job like a game he was trying to speedrun. Interesting party dynamics, classes, and races. I like the writing style. The author hit a sweet spot for me between economy of words, just enough for me to imagine the scenes in a brisk pace of the story moving on. Threaded throughout are hints and investigations of the true nature of the game. A great read. My only detractor was that Martin's lack of connection with people made him a bit harder to relate to. Better gamer, not much fun at parties. So a slight thing for Ian there, but still gives it a great review score of 8.8 out of 10. I definitely agree. I didn't give it quite as high a review score. I give it a 7.8, which is kind of a very familiar pacing scoring between us, and that my review scores are generally about a point higher, a point lower than Ian's for the things we both enjoyed. So I definitely agree that this is a good story. Okay, and his last review that he gave us this week was for Thomas Whipple's Press Start System Discovered book number 1. I give it a 7.9 out of 10. He says, urban fantasy LitRPG, not high literature, pretty good story that longer than the page count might suggest, felt a bit rushed. It's an interesting assortment of elements from various sources, gets his power from a game and now sees all the supernatural beings among us. There's a variety of training and a bit of conflict to liven things up. And again, he gave it a score of 7.9 out of 10. So I actually like this one quite a bit more than I did, I believe. I think my biggest concern here was technical writing issues made it challenging to read. And I think and this is very true to admit, but I didn't realize it was written by an author that I'd read before. I thought it was just like a first-time author's attempt at fan writing. And so that kind of gives you a hint at the issues. Now, the author might have very well cleaned it up, made whatever editing issues, and so made them. That might not have been an issue for Ian as he read it, but in my original review, that was an issue. So there we go. And that is it for Ian's pick of the week. And that is it for the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening, for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and our webpage at LitRPGPodcast.com. If you enjoy the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you don't want to find out all the ways you can support the show, help keep it free and ad-free, remember to go visit us at LitRPGPodcast.com/support. But until I can hang out again with you, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.